Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to make a basic HTML page using CSS. So we're just going to use Notepad to do this, and so I'm going to create a folder. I'm just going to call it HTML Demo, and I'm just going to create a text document. We're going to call this first page index.html. Now, when you change the extension, it's going to give you a warning. That's fine. And we're going to edit it with Notepad++. Notepad++ is a program you can get from notepad-plus-plus.org. It's a great text editing tool that is optimized for writing code. So I'm going to edit with Notepad++, and we're just going to make a basic page. And you start off an HTML page by identifying the doc type, and we're using something called XML to write our HTML. XML is basically just a data format that has opening and closing tags with these angle braces. And HTML is a form of XML designed as a markup language to display things on the web. Now, an HTML document has basically two sections in it, a head block and a body block. The head block doesn't show up in the page and is just and is there to specify some configuration elements for a page. So we can see here we have the HTML element with an open and closing tag, a head element with an open and closing tag, and a body element with a opening and closing tag. Now, one of the most common things you put in the head block is a title, and we'll see where this shows up. And then we will have the body tag here. So this is all you need to make a basic HTML page. W3 Schools has a great website, w3schools.com. They have an HTML tutorial, and they have documentation on all of the different elements that you can have in HTML. So this is a great place to learn HTML. Here's their format. And actually, you notice that with this one, we don't even really need this, I think, anymore. I think we can just do that. So once we have that, I'm going to close this out and then just double click on this, and it will show up. And we can see it says hello. I'm going to open this up in Notepad++ again, and I'm going to put this over on the side. And what you can do is you can right click on your HTML page and view page source. And what you're going to see is this page source is exactly what's here. So this markup results in a page that looks like this. Just shows hello. Well, where did the HTML demo part go? Well, that shows up here. The title referred to here in the head block is the title of the tab. You can also use the inspect key, and if you use inspect, you'll see that your code shows up here, along with a number of other things. If there's any error in the pages, they'll show up in this console. We can also look at sources, and it'll show us what pages this browser is, what files this browser is using to render this page. So here we can see there's index.html. If we click on that, you'll see that our code shows up there as well. So the HTML is a markup language which displays things so that it looks the way we want it to look like. Now in the blog post for this tutorial, I have code here that we can just copy and paste to build a little bit more elaborate page. And so I'm going to replace that here. And we'll go through this and show what gets displayed. So all the changes are in this body block, and we've added a few elements. First, we've added a header, not to be confused with the head block. Let's see what happens. I'm going to actually comment these out. I had Control K and Control C, and that commented these out. And then I'm going to save this and refresh it so we can see these things show up one at a time. So there we see that the header block shows up as a header. And the other thing we have here is we have these H1 tags. Notice if I get rid of these, it looks like that. If I do this, it shows it as an H1 header. Now, this header tag here actually doesn't style anything by itself. These are called contextual tags, and they're just here to help, one, for accessibility. So these make it easier for for example, a web reader for someone who's blind to be able, it will be able to determine this is a header, and it can do a better job of reading through the web page if you put these blocks in. So you want to use these contextual elements. They don't style the element. The thing that's styling the element is this H1 tag, which means header 1. You also have header 2 through 6, and they progressively are smaller headers. And you can see, so you can use these to style your page the way you want. And Control-Shift-K is uncomment for Notepad. So now I'm going to add the nav element, and you can see this nav element, again, it's a contextual element, doesn't style anything by itself. I am also using a ordered list, and what an ordered list does is basically just display everything that's in a list element tag below it and it automatically increments a number next to it like this. So you can use that, or you can use UL, which is an unordered list. And an unordered list just puts a bullet marker. Now, you'll notice that this styling is not very interesting. It's kind of just boilerplate. And so now we have a div. A div is basically just, you can think of it as just a way of dividing a section of code up so that we can identify it later. And often a div will have an ID or a class tag. We'll look at class tags later, but this one has an ID tag that just says this is the main content. Div tags are often used when you don't have a contextual tag, but you want to separate an element and identify it as being separate. We're going to see that's going to become important with CSS and JavaScript later on. So you're going to use div tags quite a bit. And then I'll show this a side tag. And right now, a side tag is another contextual element. Doesn't really style anything. It just puts this in this own little area. And we have a section tag here. And here we have two sections. And each one in its own. Now, what does style things is this paragraph tag. A paragraph tag is one you use frequently. What it does, it just takes whatever you have in here and puts all that text in there and then puts a line. Now, one thing to note is I can put several spaces in here and HTML will ignore the extra spaces. It automatically defaults everything to one extra space. If you wanted two spaces, you would have to add it in with special characters later, which we'll talk about in a second. So this paragraph tag adds the carriage return. Here we have our section 2, and an article is another contextual tag. We have some articles inside of this section. And then we can put in a footer. And again, footer is another conceptual tag. So you may be asking, well, why do we do all this stuff if it doesn't actually style or change anything? Why don't we just put the code? Well, we can use these to style our page with something called CSS. So to style our page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our Explorer here so we can see our file, and we're going to add another text file, and we're going to call it style.css. And we're going to edit with Notepad++ as well. And again, for my blog post, we have this code already here. And what we can see here is this is the identifier, and it says everything which has a body tag, make its font be Arial and its font size be 10px. If you look at the W3 Schools site, there's a whole section on CSS, and it talks about selectors. So this would be the selector, that's the P tag. It has a section on syntax. So we have a selector. Between curly braces, we have multiple declarations. Each declaration is a property and a value. And there's a lot of different things you can set. In fact, they have all of them listed here. And it would be exhaustive to go through all of them. But once you understand the basic functioning, it's pretty straightforward. You find what you want to set. Like, for example, if you want to look at color, you would see all the information about, for example, if you want to set the background color, this would tell you how to do that. And it has examples of all the different ways of doing this. Now, we're styling our page using a external style sheet. So with the external style sheet, we have an external style page. We're setting the attributes we want, or the properties we want here. And if I just creating that page doesn't change anything. Watch, when I refresh this, nothing happens. What I have to do is, if I want to use that external style sheet, I have to put in the head block a reference. And the way we do that is we say link, and we tell it that we want to do a style sheet. We have to specify that this is text CSS. And then href, we have to tell it where this style sheet is. Well, this style sheet is located in the same location. So this is style.css. I'm going to save that and refresh. And now you see that this page has been changed and looks like what we wanted. Going back to our style page, we can add some more. And now we've added some styling for the nav and the aside. Now, what we've done is on the nav is we set a float element, and on the aside, so on the nav we float left, on the side we float right. Let's see what those do. In addition, we've also set a height, width, some padding, and some alignment. So let's look what the float left and right does. We'll save that and refresh it. And you can see now what's happened is it comes down here, it sets the body tag, it styles the header. When it gets to the navigation, it says, oh, I need to put this to the left of everything I have so far. So put the navigation to the left of everything. And then it says put the aside to the right of everything. So everything else ends up in here, the navigation on the left and the aside on the right. So you can see we're using these contextual tags now to position our elements using CSS. So CSS is doing the positioning. The contextual tags don't actually do anything. They just identify things. Just like the div tag just is there to identify stuff. The style comes from our CSS. The other thing we have here is this padding. So we have something called the box model. W3 Schools has a page for the box model, and it shows you what the box model is. So in the middle is your content. The padding attribute in CSS is the spacing between the content and any border you may have. If you have a border, the border shows up next, and that can be a dotted line, a solid line. There's a whole bunch of specifiers on what you can tell it to do with a border. And then it's got the margin, which is, again, empty space between the border and the element next to it. You can actually set these for all the way around or just the top, left, right, or bottom. We can also change color. if we go to, let's say we wanted to set the background color of our header. There's a couple different ways we can set the background color. One way is by specifying its red, green, blue attributes in hexadecimal. So if I put a number and I put, say, 24 6C 96, well, that's actually 3 numbers. These are hexadecimal numbers. That means the digits are actually values between 0 and 15. So that's why this letter shows up. And that represents the red, green, and blue value of that color. So how can we figure that out? Well, you can actually put in Color Picker, and Google will bring up one. And you can see here, there's actually different ways of representing a color. And the Color Picker actually lets you pick colors in all kinds of different ways. It shows you what it's going to look like over on the left. It allows you to wash out the color and go more towards a grayish hue, or go all the way to saturated hues. And so, for example, the color I put in there was 24 6C 96, and you can see it's going to be this color. And so you could just visually pick your colors here, or you could find known colors and type them in. This is the decimal equivalent, so 24 is 36. So 24 hexadecimal is 36 decimal. 6C hexadecimal is 108. Why do we use hexadecimal? It's just a convenient way of ensuring that we always have 2 digits. So we always have 6 digits. And hexadecimal converts into binary, and the colors are actually binary numbers. So this just ends up being the most computationally simple way of storing a number for a language. So, and HTML is a very old language, so they used hexadecimal here. And so if I do that, save it, refresh it, we now see that the header area specified here has a blue background. We could do the same thing with the nav. And maybe we'll use our color picker. Pick some red color, copy that, paste it, save it, and refresh it, and there's our nav. So I have some more of this that I can copy and paste from my demo page. And so we got a background color. You can also specify color by just specifying name. There's some standard color names for CSS. And again, you can look them up. There's some of those standard names. That's not an exhausted list. There's 140 of them. Let's see, I guess if we click here, we can get all of them. And those are just a little more convenient way, perhaps, of specifying colors. We're also commenting out this padding, and yeah, we're setting background colors for the aside and the footer. So let's see, we save that, refresh that, and this color changed to blue. But you can kind of see how the color is set. Now the other nice thing about this is it's showing us that, look, there's some padding here. And so normally, you know, for a more modern web page, you usually have these elements without this padding around here. We're going to see how to fix that later on. And so far we've been using the contextual elements. Notice this one, though, is a little different. It's got a number sign in it. What that number sign means is this is an ID selector. And an ID selector, the way it works is it's looking for anything with an ID in it. In fact, you can set that ID pretty much anywhere. So like maybe I could make article 1 here. Now, ID fields, you usually only have them set on one element, so I'm going to do that. And let's see, refresh this. I'm going to hit Control F5, let's see, or Shift F5. Yeah, I don't think this is showing up great. Let's see. Let's try a different color. Or make sure it's spelled correctly. Ah. This has a lowercase c. Okay. Yeah, now you can kind of see there's a light gray here. I'm going to change it to just gray so it's a little easier to see. There we go. Now you can see the gray color there. If I were to move this, for example, into this article, just leave it there on that article. Looks like I left it there by accident. And refresh. Notice that just article 1 is gray now. And all that's just to show you that an ID field can be placed on anything. And we use those to kind of very flexibly set styles on things that we want that aren't necessarily, when we don't want to set on every single nav, every single aside, but we just want one element, we use this ID tag. Now, another thing we can do is, let's say we want all the padding to be 5. We can actually set the same thing, same CSS properties on multiple selectors just by separating them with commas. So here I've placed them like this. And now when I refresh it, they all have the same padding. And you can see the padding right there on this one, but it changed the way this looks. Now, one thing with these pages is different browsers will have different default settings for the margin and padding. So you see this margin here. And then you see a little bit of that here. And because they're all different, and we want our pages to look the same among different site, different browsers, what we often do is at the very top, we will use the everything selector, which is an asterisk. And we will just zero out at the very start margin values and padding values, just so that we're always starting with the same looking page. So it ends up looking like this. And you can see this is now fitting in the entire web page, and it's looking better now. We can also style the aside a little differently. Let's see. Maybe what we'll do is we'll reduce the size of the aside to 200 pixels. And that looks like this. And let's say we want to put an image in here. What we could do is so to add an image here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder, and often we'll put all our images in an images folder. And I found an image of a coin. You can take any image you want. And you take that image, place it in this folder, and then we can, in here, find our aside. And I'm going to put some more HTML in here. I'm going to put an H2. And now I'm using what's called an inline style. So we don't have to place all of our styles in a separate page. We can also set them on a particular line. Now, the reason to do this is because you only want to style one thing. So in this case, I'm just styling this one element, and I don't want the font size to be the default H2 style. I want it to be 12 pixels. So if I need to do that, I can use just an inline style. And notice that it's very similar to the page here where you have the selector, curly braces, and then what we want the style to be. But instead of the curly braces, you just say style is equal to, and then in here, you put your styles, you say font size, and you, for example, and you put them here. And you can put more in here by separating them with commas or semicolons, but here we're just setting the one. And then I want a carriage return, and I'm going to do that with this break. And so this is an element that just puts a carriage return wherever you want it. Now, normally you don't use this. You would only use it when you have kind of a tricky styling thing. Most of the time, divs automatically put a carriage return at the end. Paragraph tags automatically put a carriage return in the end. And so those are your primary ways of breaking things up. And then for an image tag, at the minimum, it requires just saying where this is. So we have our images in an images folder, and it's called coin.jpg. But we can also do other things. We can, if I just do that, let's see what it looks like. Let's see, did I spell it right? Yep. Oh, I misspelled. I need an equal sign there. And we can see this is a little bit large. It won't fit in that space. So how do we make it fit in that space? We can set its height and width attributes. And now it's fitting inside. The other thing that we want to do with images for accessibility is there's something called an alt attribute. And all you put in here is just description. And that can be picked up by a web reader and allows someone who can't see to get a description of what this image is. So that's for accessibility. Now, we've seen inline styles, which is this. This is an inline style. We've seen a external style sheet. The third way of setting styles are with internal style sheets. So this is an external style sheet because it's in a page which is outside of. It's a file that's external to this file. An internal style sheet is a style sheet which is in the page. And an internal style sheet goes in the head block. And it looks a little bit like an external style sheet, but it's written right in the page. Now, the key difference here is that obviously this can only set styles for items in this page. So this would not be a great way of setting styles for the entire site because you'd have to repeat everything. And so I'm going to use this to style the section. All the sections, and I'm going to say I'm going to set the style, the font. It's set the font. You set the font family, and the way fonts work are if that font is loaded on the machine that's using it, then it will use that font. If it doesn't have it, it'll find the closest font to it. So that's why it says font family. So you aren't always guaranteed to get the exact font you request. And so I'm going to set the bottom border of each of the sections and let's see what that does. And you can see that sets a dark blue border on the bottom of each section. We can also, let's say that we wanted to just be able to arbitrarily just set, make something red. We can do that by using what's called a class selector. So I'm actually going to do this in the external style sheet. This might be something that might be useful to have in other places. So this is a class selector. We had a ID selector here. this is a class selector. They're very similar, except that while an ID field can only be assigned to one thing, a class can be assigned to as many things as you want. So we might want to put emphasis on multiple things. And so we'll just make the color red. That's the font color. And we'll set the font weight to 800. And then we can apply it. Say in this article 2, we can just say class equals emphasis. And now this is style it this way. So we'll save that. And you can see now we have emphasis being placed on that second one. So some other things we could do. Let's go back to the internal style sheet and let's see if we can do some things with this nav list. And what we'll do is, in addition to the section, we will style the unordered list. Set the text indent to 5 pixels and the list style position to inside. We'll save that. And you can see now the bullets show up. So if you wanted the bullets to show up, you could do that. We could also change this to an ordered list and change the navigation to an ordered list. And now we would see the numbers. It would also be nice to do something with this footer. So let's put an anchor tag, a link. So an anchor tag is a link, and the way you do it is you put an A. That means anchor tag. You provide an href parameter, and you put in whatever link page you want to go to. I'm going to go to CNM's website. So in the opening tag, you put in where you want to go, and then in the content of the tag, which is between the opening and closing tag, you put what you want it to look like to the user. And then you have your closing tag. So what that ends up with is you have your classic blue tag. Now this kind of doesn't contrast well with this. If I wanted to change that, what I could do is say, and maybe I'll put that in the internal one because maybe that only applies to this page. I'll make it yellow. And now my link is yellow. And that gives us kind of a complete page. We have the typical elements that you see in a page. You have some kind of navigation, sometimes on the left, sometimes at the top. We floated ours to the left. You have your content. You may have some asides, and then you have a footer. Now, often your navigation will be a series of links here that go to additional pages. And so you'll make more pages and link to them. Thank you very much.